Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Fast Talk, your source for the science of endurance sports training. We have a good group here. Griffin, this has been something that's been kind of a pet project of yours. You've been really excited about this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to talk about today?
Yes, I'm so excited that this is finally coming to fruition. We are here today with Dan Cooke, the founder of Expedition Detroit. He has flown in here to Boulder, to Denver, to have a fun ski trip and to be with us. So a double whammy there. And we really get to talk today about the changing landscape of the endurance sports industry, both from the athlete perspective and from the coach perspective, and talk about a new way to look at how that change is taking place and what opportunities lie within this change. I really am pumped because normally we have someone on who is a scientist who wants to talk about a biochemical pathway, who wants to nerd out with Trevor and argue about the latest research. And I'm always here for that. But I think we're bringing something new to our listeners today that's something they can sink their teeth into, that they can get excited about, and that they can partake in this change and really see where we can go with this, especially for a place like Detroit.
'Tis the season for spring knee. As sunshine and spring weather inspires us to ramp up our riding mileage, our knees don't always keep up. If you got knee pain, we have the solution for you. Fast Talk Lab members can follow our Knee Health Pathway, featuring Dr. Andy Pruitt. See the introduction in the Knee Health Pathway at fasttalklabs.com. So what I found really interesting about this, we were talking offline before the episode started about how are we going to introduce this? How are we going to talk about this? And you said to me, let's start by painting this picture of what's going on with athletes and the decline in the athlete market. And that's certainly something we talk a lot about on the show, but our show tends to be more focused on, that more elite, that very serious athlete who's trying to perform, often trying to race and get results. And yeah, when we are talking about that market, we're talking about the race scene, it is a bit of a bleak picture right now. You are seeing a decline. There aren't as many races as there used to be. We're seeing the athlete market go down. But if we're talking about this more adventure type athlete of all age ranges, who's just trying to enjoy these different sports, trying to get into it, who's probably also going to have a little bit of a difference in terms of what they want to know about, what they want to learn, I actually think that's an exploding market. So let's talk about a shift where things are heading you're just not seeing that elite sport, endurance sport, being as strong as it has been at points in the past, but you're seeing a diversification and you're seeing a growth of a whole new market. And how do we meet that market? And so, Dan, we've been sitting here talking. You just got on a flight, so I feel like we need to kind of hand the mic to you and let you talk a little bit about this.
That's fair. And Griffin, to your intro, I am an attorney, so if you want to argue, that's my bread and butter. I'm always ready. Name the topic.
I have two brothers, therefore I'm ready to take you on.
Awesome. No, it's a pleasure to be here. Just that topic alone about new markets and new athletes and really the expansion of the recreational enthusiasts, especially when it comes to running, especially when it comes to biking. That theme specifically is what we're seeing in the Detroit area, because not only is it a recreational type of athlete that's growing across the market, but in these relatively nascent outdoor markets like Detroit, you're seeing that effect amplified. You're seeing, especially with reports that the DNR and the Huron-Clinton Metro Parks in the Detroit area have been producing, the outdoor industry as a whole, for both dollars and participation, has absolutely exploded since the pandemic in Detroit. I mean, even like based on our offline conversation, for me, someone who has always loved coming out west and experiencing this caliber of outdoor experiences, I didn't even know that existed in Detroit until the pandemic. And now that other similarly situated adventure athletes who aren't professionals but are fit and have an interest, that they've found those same opportunities just based on what I've seen in Detroit specifically. I think you're absolutely right on a national scale that there is this explosion and demand in that market.
I think that we can see this happening across industries, right? Because I come from the consumer product goods side, and Even prior to the pandemic, we were having discussions about how does product interact with new cyclists and asking the questions of, does somebody feel comfortable wearing spandex shorts when they're a beginner cyclist? Is that a...
No.
Exactly.
I will
They
answer
don't.
that as someone training right now. No.
They don't. And it's a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Right? We think that riding a bike is so accessible to people because oftentimes people have bikes when they grow up. But when you switch from being a ride your bike to school to being a cyclist, there's a lot of knowledge that people don't have. There's cliques of people that they don't feel like they're a part of. And as you're pointing out, in places like Detroit, there's not necessarily the social structure, the infrastructure that other places, maybe like Boulder, enjoys a little bit more. When everybody on your street is a cyclist, it's very easy to become one. And so I'm really glad that we're having this conversation because at Fast Talk, it is important to us. And oftentimes we do focus on one segment of that market, right? And sometimes you have to do that so that you can educate that segment. But we always need to be aware of how different people interact with the sport.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point to just let's set the table. You're talking about segments of the market, especially for athletes. Can we identify maybe a few personalities that we can all kind of understand as far as the athlete market goes? We've talked about this before, Rob. Do you have a few in mind that you could?
Yeah, we certainly can. And you can break down these segments in 100 different ways. And let's be honest, we're talking about segments, but at the same time, we're not talking about nice, neat little boxes. We're not talking about discrete differences between people. And something that we have always struggled with is kind of internally people fitting into more than one box. And you can do that, especially in different sports or throughout different phases of your career. Oftentimes, and I think that we mentioned it already, with Fast Talk, we're focusing on the racer, right? The person that is out there looking for competition. And in my mind, that competition does not necessarily have to lead to a podium. You can have a racer mentality. You can approach a sport in a racer viewpoint, even if you're competing for 20th place, or even if you're not competing against other people, you're just competing against yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? Strava and looking at your best possible segment time on Strava, making training decisions, making equipment decisions. All of that is playing into this person that really looks and loves the competition aspect of endurance sports. Whether that's your first time in a 5K or your 20th marathon, you can still be motivated by the same thing. There are other people on the other end of the market, and I hate using these very objective terms.
Yeah.
There are other people who engage with the sport differently, and their motivation is adventure, Trevor, like you mentioned before. This is where I am right now, and I do a lot of events, but I don't necessarily do the event because of where I come on the scorecard for the event. I do it because it's an amazing guided adventure of an area that I don't know. Right. And as listeners know, I rode across Portugal last year. I would never have known to find those roads or those trails without that event. They did all that work for me. I saw this amazing landscape, had amazing time with friends that were then new to me. And for the adventurer persona, that's where the value is there. Doing something new, trying something new, meeting somebody new, engaging in a new sport. So we can, that's setting both sort of ends of the market. And Griffin, it's up to you how sort of deep we begin defining those.
I mean, that's great. And first off, some of the things that you just talked about are actually elements of what Expedition Detroit does in Detroit. So this is a great segue to say, Dan, you're the best person to introduce Expedition Detroit. Can you give us an understanding of what Expedition Detroit actually does?
Yeah. And it was funny. I was nodding along with that entire segment, both for me personally and for what we've seen with Expedition Detroit and the kind of engagement that we've gotten with our content. For this audience, Expedition Detroit is an outdoor recreation media company that on a very high level, the goal is to put the entire outdoor industry within an hour's drive of downtown Detroit under one roof. So again, just talking about the different genres of athletes. If you are someone who has engaged in world-class skiing or running or mountain biking or road biking or whatever, Expedition Detroit, and you're either visiting or you live in the Detroit area, Expedition Detroit is your one-stop shop to find the different outdoor destinations, outlets, gear providers, advocacy groups, race organizations that provide the different outlets for your caliber of athlete, let's call it. On the flip side, and this is extremely prominent in especially Detroit, again, a nascent outdoor market, Expedition Detroit is also the place to find out where that trail is that you never knew existed that's less than a mile from your house. And, go into that point about the adventure athlete that's looking just to experience something new or find that element of adventure in the mundane, in their everyday life. That could be Expedition Detroit's tagline of, hey, all of these parks, all of these trails, all of these races, all of these opportunities have been hiding in plain sight. But because no one has, taken a spotlight, put it directly on that trail or that town or that sport or that retailer and said, here it is. It's there. If you have an interest, go and find it. That industry really hasn't developed in Expedition Detroit or in the Detroit area. So Expedition Detroit is really the driving factor, the engine, to use Motor City terms. I hate doing that. That's really intentionally pushing the industry forward. Another question that I was asked offline earlier and I forgot to respond to because I'm Irish and I tend to go off on little tangents is why just Detroit? Why not Expedition Michigan, Expedition Midwest, Expedition America? Although I would love to see the business scale up to that point, the reason why it is Expedition Detroit is because even within that micro market, there's so much value, there's so much untapped adventure and really untapped engagement between, the 5+ million people who live there that have always wanted to engage in that kind of athleticism, in that kind of recreation, but have never felt like they could. And even within that micro market, there is enough to build an entire platform above it. And we've been operating for a year and a half now, and I still feel like we've just scratched the surface. And that's only focusing on Detroit.
Dan, real quick, I want to back up, and I hope that this doesn't take us on too much of a tangent, but you mentioned something earlier, and that was across different caliber or level of athletes. And I want to highlight that because a lot of the individuals listening to this show right now, the standard Fast Talk audience, fairly knowledgeable athlete, because, you've been listening to us for a while, and coaches. And I don't want those audience members to be like, how is this conversation relevant to me, right? And it's relevant for this reason. Coaches, if you're listening, athletes, if you're listening too, I am contacted constantly by people for coaching. Half of them say, I don't know if I'm worthy of being coached or not, because I'm not trying to go to Ironman World Championships. I'm not trying to win or get a podium. I don't know if coaching is the right thing for me. And I think that both coaches and athletes, we need to understand that there is value across all different levels of athletes, regardless of how that person interacts with the sport. There is a worthiness there that makes groups like what you're doing totally worthwhile to be involved with. Coaches, there are athletes who need to be coached even though they aren't trying to get a personal best. They might not even, be trying to do a super epic adventure, but they still need guidance and support and love and help with the things that they're doing, even as they enter the sport. Mm-hmm. And athletes, if you're listening to this too, and you're identifying with this and saying, hey, yeah, you know what, there is, I might not be trying to do anything quote unquote special. It doesn't matter. Everything that you're trying to do is special. We love to talk about the big things that we do, Trevor, right? How many championship races have you talked about? How many times have I talked about riding across Portugal? It's not like my life is epic every day. And we love to harp on these epic things that we've done. And even if you haven't been Canadian national championships like Trevor or done the things that I've done, it doesn't matter. There's still value there.
I was going to say, we were actually having a conversation outside earlier about the risk of not taking on a coach. And if you're that athlete who's starting to get more interested, you want to take on more adventures, you want to start getting into races, and you do this unassisted, you can risk all of these injuries that will prevent you from actually taking on these goals. And I think this is a great opportunity as we're talking about this pipeline into becoming an athlete, and you're talking about the elite racer as well, for us to respect the age and experience in this room, gentlemen.
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 I thought you were shooting a shot at Trevor. I'm not a part of that.
No, I think it would be great for the two of you to share some anecdotes about what it has historically, didn't mean that, historically meant.
I was going to say, this is a Trevor segment. He's got more history than I have.
Yeah.
Well, this actually leads to the big question I want to ask you. So let me ask this, and give me a couple minutes to explain this. And I'm going to start with the whole age thing.
It's 4 and...
Well, I was there for the actual speech. I'm that old. But anyway, we did an episode a few years ago on aging and dug into the research on aging and looking at, what happens to you as you hit your 40s, as you hit your 50s, hit your 60s. It was some of the most fascinating research that I had read, because really what they're showing now is all of what we believed about aging and the decline that you see with aging isn't true, isn't physiologically true. And so the question is, why did we have the belief that we had? And here's why. It was a cultural thing. And what you saw culturally up until very recently was, if you're an athlete, you start in high school. If you're pretty good, you move into college sports. And then if you're really good at the college level, you either start working with your national governing body and you go on that Olympic track, or you go on a professional track. For everybody else, it's, hey, that was a fun thing I did when I was a kid, but now I'm an adult. I've got to work.
Responsibilities,
and that's kid stuff. I don't do that anymore. And that's why all the old research was showing this rapid decline. It wasn't because people were getting decrepit at 30 and couldn't ride a bike or go and run anymore. It's just, it was culturally, that's not what you do anymore. And there was this shift. There was a shift where people started saying, you know what? I want to keep doing this. I want this to be a lifelong thing. I want to stay in these sports. The issue they're now facing, look, I butted up against this myself. I got it serious into cycling when I was 27, which you kind of laugh at this now, but everybody was saying to me, what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. You're so old. You're 27.
Oh, that hurts.
But what you have now is all these people that are getting into the sport, but the infrastructure is still based around that older model of getting you on the Olympic path or getting you on the professional path. And so now I think you have all these athletes to say, I'm really into this. I really want to do this. This is a lifelong thing for me, but there isn't an infrastructure for them. So this is the question that I want to throw at you is, what do they need? What's the different infrastructure that gets away from that Olympic path, but allows them to be lifelong athletes and really achieve whatever level they want, which isn't necessarily a standing on a podium in front of a TV camera?
I've been listening to an audiobook over the last 2 weeks all about the science of aging well. And I had no idea you were going to bring this up. So I feel like I've been
perfect
given a primer. And literally one of the chapters I just finished listening to while I've been driving back and forth between, different parks is about really the identity. How do you lock in someone who not only wants to live a long life, because just the quantity of years is not important at all. It's not the health or the lifespan, it's the health span. It's the quality of those years. And what do you do to get yourself or to become the kind of person that is still able to run marathons, if that's what you want to do, in your 70s or 80s? There was actually, you guys probably know the name of the French cyclist who in their hundreds beat their own record.
I don't know this.
At 101, they set the record, decided they could have done better, and at 103, beat that after implementing a training regimen.
That's awesome.
Over those 2 years.
The trivia knowledge in this one just will astonish you. Yeah.
I wish I remembered the name, but the point being that person was not only, from a physical perspective, healthy enough to do that, from a mental perspective, they were cognizant or had the cognition to put in a training regimen to discipline themselves, to knock that out. And that person didn't get the desire to do that in their hundreds or their 90s. That was a lifelong, decades-long, intentional effort. And what the author speaks about here is you really need to lock in, again, on the athlete theme, that life is a decathlon. You don't need to be the best in every single sport when it comes to a physical perspective. You just need to be really good in all of them. You need to lock in that identity of being a well-rounded athlete. So, maybe your goal is to do an Ironman. Sure, that's fantastic. And if you have the caliber to be, competitive in those world-class races like you guys have throughout your careers, God bless you. But if your goal is to be healthy and active, and that end goal is, when I'm in my 80s, I want to be as fit as most people are in their 40s or their mid 50s. You can do that by locking in that identity with small incremental changes to your fitness, how you approach your diet, how you approach, even today when I was, in the Denver airport, 90% of the people walking past me were taking the escalator up. I decided to take the stairs.
It's faster.
It is faster.
At Denver, yeah.
But just dialing in those little tweaks here or there to your everyday life, let alone your training fitness, let alone, what goals you have, I think is one of the key components to at least just locking in that identity of the sport I'm pursuing on top of these, finite goals is to be the best version of me that I can be well into my older years, well into I'm supposed to have retired from this sport.
So how do you support those people? I mean, you've brought a lot of them into Expedition Detroit.
Yeah.
So what is the need that you are serving? What is it that's bringing them there saying, this is what I need to be exactly what you just talked about?
That's a great question because there's so many points. I mean, the nice thing about Expedition Detroit in this industry, and I've had people say, I want to write for you, or I want to make a video, or I want to do this. What should I write on? And I say, pick a topic because it's such a nascent
They're
market.
all relevant.
Yeah. One of our most popular articles last fall was written by one of our guest writers, Katie, and it was about biking to apple orchards. Because, Midwest, like that's a big, deal in the fall. So taking something that people are already interested in and adding an ingredient of fitness, of adventure. So I think to your point, one item is just creating the ecosystem that can support whatever that interest is, however they want to tweak their lifestyle a little bit, at least on our platform. Number one is just making it a reality, taking it from being an idea, putting it in tangible form where people could read your article, they could watch your video, they could, buy the gear at an affordable price, shameless plug for the merch, to actually be able to feel comfortable, recreating and going out and doing it. And then another item is creating the actual experiences where you make it like one of our clients is a woman in her 50s. She's now gone on 5 guided hikes, including a night hike. She's done 2 night hikes. One, it was 9 degrees and everyone else bailed. She signed up.
And Trevor, he's talking Fahrenheit, not Celsius. 9 degrees Fahrenheit is very, very cold.
He's by the border. He's still on the U.S. side.
And I called her and I said, hey, you don't have to do this. If you don't want to, we can postpone when it's, a nice tropical 20 degrees in a week. And she said, no, I want to do it.
Yeah.
And she's left a lot of reviews, and a lot of the reviews are simply, even though her fitness is phenomenal for her age, saying if this weren't a guided experience, if the website wasn't here, if Dan the guide wasn't here, if I wasn't with someone to just bridge that 0 to 1 of comfort level, I would have never done this.
Yeah.
So I think it's, as much as I don't want to use the if you build it, they will come, it does require a degree of intentionality on the part of people like us who are in the greater outdoor, athleticism, recreational space, to really be intentional in engaging an audience that may have an interest, but doesn't even know what step one might be. Sometimes you have to cater at least that little bit of a step one, and then they take care of the rest.
Just to clarify, had he done that expedition on the other side of the border where it would have been negative 10 Celsius, the question wouldn't have been, are we still going? The question would be, do I wear a t-shirt or do I bring a jacket?
or a toque.
Of course you wear a toque. That's got nothing to do with temperature. It could be 30 Celsius outside and you're wearing a toque.
Dan, I want to expand on something that you were bringing up there, the intentionality and the opportunity side of things. And I think, Trevor, you had asked, how do you support people to remain fit, to remain engaged throughout life, especially with aging? And it goes back to, Trevor, kind of what you had talked about. At some point, oftentimes people begin to adult, right? Adulting is a thing. And I see the people whom are most successful when they set themselves intentionally, when they set themselves up for success. What does that look like? I grew up in the Northeast. Very common for people to live in southern New Hampshire and commute to Boston or to Massachusetts for work. And you're spending 45 minutes to an hour and a half in a car every day. That's an hour and a half to 3 hours a day that you could certainly be doing something else. And oftentimes that's exercising. And I know that a lot of people, end up in places like Boulder and other places throughout the country with that intentional thought of, I'm going to move to where there are recreational opportunities. I'm going to live and work in very close proximity to each other so I don't have this commute. COVID was very helpful, I think, with a lot of people beginning to work from home, but it opens up time in your day where you can still be an adult, where you can still take care of your kids, right? Because we can't just forget about our kids, where you can still get your grocery shopping and your chores done and all of the adult things, but you can also have time for yourself. Now, Dan, what you're doing that's really special is the second part of this, is it's showing opportunity in a place like Detroit, where, as you had mentioned before, it doesn't seem like you should have these opportunities in Detroit. Detroit is not synonymous with outdoors mecca, but as you know, and people are learning, there's amazing opportunities. You just have to step outside your comfort a little bit and see and experience them. And you have built a program that has really brought that opportunity right to people in an easy, consumable, digestible manner that feels safe for people whom aren't used to hiking at night in the cold, who maybe want and would love to do something like that, but they're a little bit afraid. And frankly, maybe they should be, because they could get themselves in trouble. With somebody like you, with somebody like your organization, you're really bringing that opportunity so that they can engage with sports in ways that otherwise wouldn't have been possible.
I had the honor, the privilege of meeting Dan a couple of years ago. But before that, I grew up in the environment that Expedition Detroit encompasses. And I knew for that, however many decades, a fraction of the parks, the trails, the opportunities outdoors that existed. And in academia, they talk about the brain drain of places like California, right? Like you educate, you incubate, and you export is brain drain. And I think that's kind of what we've talked about before, what happens with the adventurist and the athlete in Michigan, or at least in Southeast Michigan, where there's this passion. You just think, I'm developing this passion, then I have to leave a certain place. And so going back to your question, Trevor, of what does this athlete need? We're talking about the ecosystem that's developed. We're talking about the knowledge and expertise to take that first step. And that, I don't want to say hand-holding, but the guide, point you in the right direction to know how to do something safely so that you can maximize your enjoyment. The next part I would say is integrating into your normal everyday routine or lifestyle as a start. So not just working for the weekend, but living your life Sunday through the next Sunday and incorporating it in small bits and pieces. And then we're looking at something like, okay, how do I take this to the next level? Because as soon as you start scratching that itch, you're going to want more. You're going to want to see what's next. You're going to be this person in their 50s saying, no, I want to do the nighttime hike. No, I want to do this. I want to push myself. I want to bring other people that I care about along for the ride. And then I might start looking at these big races and doing something else. So I think it's this really beautiful slippery slope, right? You bring someone into the fold, you start to give them the basic information, you help them feel safe about it, you help them feel a little bit more familiar so that you're not cruising around in spandex, constantly wondering, how does this look? Or like, this feels weird. And then you help them push the limits. And I really think those components are things that Expedition Detroit does such a good job of really bringing to the athlete market and to the future athlete market. We're really developing this pipeline here. So on that note, I would love to do a little bit of a flashback and have one of our team members come on and quiz the three of you. Notice that, yes, I will not be participating because no, you are definitely going to be.
I know.
And just quiz on what has happened for the athlete pipeline and the history of an endurance sport. So we're going to bring on Andrea. She's going to quiz the three of you. The way that you will answer is...
Do you have papers and read cube on this, Trevor, that we can...
No, you're just taking this.
I was not allowed to bring my science.
No. You're going to be quizzed. There's no buzzer button, though we do have that button downstairs.
I was going to say, can we get the
I thought about
button?
it, but the idea of you jumping around the
We
microphone.
don't need that.
So
We need the awesome button. That's over on Bell's desk.
it's on Belle's desk. We can grab the awesome button.
I'll take
You'll-
the button.
You'll take the. All right, we'll go grab the buttons. Andrea's going to take my place and ask you some questions here, and we'll get started.
Pathways from Fast Talk Laboratories are a new way to explore concepts, master skills, and solve training challenges. Our new cycling interval training pathway begins with the basics of interval workouts and progresses to more advanced details: how to flawlessly execute interval workouts, which intervals bring which adaptations, and how to analyze your interval workout performance. Over 21 articles, interviews, workshops, and workouts, our new cycling interval training pathway offers you the chance to master cycling's most critical and nuanced workout format. See this pathway at fasttalklabs.com.
Andrea, welcome to the show. This is the first time having you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, this is exciting. So tell us, what are the rules here? How do we play this game?
Well, I've brought you guys 10 questions. Most of them are historical. Some are a little oddball.
And she is hiding and protecting them like you
yes,
wouldn't believe
I'm making sure
right
that
now.
Dan cannot cheat.
I know. It's very much angled away from me.
I'm that kind of person when I play card games. I have to keep them close to my chest. So this is what I'm doing. So I have 10 questions. Dan has a buzzer, and you, Trevor, and Rob, you each have your own buzzer. So we're going to play Jeopardy rules. If you hit your buzzer before I'm done answering the question, you still have to answer. So are you guys ready?
I'm out to win.
All right. Our first question. What river runs through Detroit? A. All right. That was Dan.
Sorry, I forgot it was
We
multiple
did not plan the
choice.
buttons ahead of time.
I forgot it was multiple choice. But go for it.
Nope. You
If
did the
you know.
buzzer. So
I have
you
to
have to
guess
give your
now?
answer.
Well, through Detroit, it's a little bit of a trick question, but I think you're referring to the Detroit River.
Yes, that is the answer I wrote down. This is not entirely endurance themed, but there are plenty of water features around Detroit, and
Is
there's
this
plenty of
rigged?
ways to enjoy them.
Is this rigged so that Dan knows
There are
all the
like
answers
2 Detroit
and we know
questions.
nothing?
No, there's plenty of
Shut your
endurance themed
face.
questions.
When do you
for
ask about PGC1 Alpha?
I'm ready for that one.
Never. I wrote her a check. Next question.
Next question. What year was the heart rate monitor invented? A, 1957, B, 1967, C, 1977, or D, 1987? Rob,
77.
you are correct.
Damn it, you were faster than me.
Snuck right in under there, man. Let that hand hover
like
too
had
long.
my hand
I know.
over the button. Rob's
I
like,
know.
boom, comes in
Yeah.
under.
Trevor Hover Hand Connor over here.
Well, to respect, let her give all the options before I answer.
So fun fact, the first wireless heart rate monitor was actually invented to help the Finnish national cross-country ski team with their training. So it relates back to endurance
How did
sports.
they finish?
All right, next question. How did the first Ironman triathlon race get started? Is it A, to find the toughest endurance athlete out there, B, on a dare, or C, to combine the profits of the Waikiki Rough Water Swim, the Around Oahu Cycling Race, and the Honolulu Marathon? Rob.
I respectfully gave both of you time before you answered the correct answer, which is C.
Nope.
No.
Trevor.
B.
Nope.
A.
Yes.
I respectfully gave the first wrong answer so that Dan would eventually get the right one.
So it did combine those 3 races that I mentioned, but this was created by John and Judy Collins after they saw Eddie Merckx was named the world's fittest athlete by Sports Illustrated. They decided to combine these 3 events to see like who is the toughest endurance athlete out there, because it can't just be a cyclist.
So triathletes were always jealous of cyclists.
Yes.
Got it.
All right, which sport will be making its Olympic debut at the Paris 2024 Games? Is it A, dodgeball, B, breakdancing, C, pickleball, or D, chess? Trevor.
Pickleball?
No.
Dodgeball.
No.
Don't say pickleball.
I'm going to go with
please
chess.
It's actually breakdancing.
don't. Breakdancing?
What?
Yeah.
No.
Breakdancing
No.
will be making its debut at the Paris Olympics.
Is this like underwater breakdancing?
No, but all the other 3 ones that I mentioned are actually, their international federations are vying to be at the Olympics in the future. So we might see dodgeball or pickleball in the future.
Was
And yet
it-
cyclocross isn't an Olympic sport.
Yeah.
Isn't
Wait, was this Paris 1984?
This is Paris. They're trying to get more people to watch. People just aren't really watching the Olympics anymore. So they're trying to.
So if you're a breakdancer, you're an athlete, and we can train you.
I could
Yeah.
see how chess would not help that cause.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have much hope for chess being in the Olympics, but we'll see.
Isn't skateboarding supposed to be at
I
this
think
Olympics?
it was at the last
Yeah, I
one.
It was
thought
at the last
one?
last one. Yeah.
Okay.
Ah,
Yeah. All right, next question. What year was the power meter invented for cycling? A, 1978, B, 1980, C, 1987, or D, 1988?
Come on, Trevor.
It's got to be 87 or 88, so I'll go with 87.
You're correct.
Ooh.
And SRM was the one who got the patent and created the first power meter.
Yep.
Next question. Which one of the following experiences is offered by Expedition Detroit? Is it A, night hike safaris, B, guided snowshoe treks, C, guided backpacking, or D, all of the above? Trevor.
I don't know. I just wanted to beat him to the buzzer. But I'll go with all the above.
You're correct. They also offer guided hikes and trail runs and probably more that I'm leaving out.
no, that's about it right now. More are coming down the pipeline, though.
Awesome.
So stay tuned.
All right. So who was the first winner of the Tour de France? Is it A, Henri Cornet,
Mm.
B, Rene Potier, C, Maurice Guerin, D, Lucien Petit Breton? Rob.
The second guy. The second guy was the first guy to win.
Rene?
Yeah.
No.
Damn.
Trevor?
Lucian.
No.
Ah, damn it.
The first guy.
Henri? No.
The first guy.
We
the
are
first guy
going
was
with
the first
third
guy.
It was C, Maurice Guerin. He won in 1903 and he won in 1904, but he got his title taken away in 1904
Because of a
people
blacksmith.
people thought that he was being transported by car.
Oh,
or
that's
rail.
right. That's right.
Oh.
I thought he lost because
No.
that was somebody else who
Maybe
he
it was
broke
something-
his fork, had to carry his bike to a blacksmith shop
Oh my gosh.
where he had to. So the rule was you couldn't get any help. You had to do all your repairs yourself. So he welded it back together, but he had the blacksmith running the bellows.
Oh my
And that was
gosh.
considered getting help. So he got disqualified.
Wow.
there you
I
go.
guess that's somebody else.
Was some other cyclist. All right, next question. What year was the power meter invented for running? A, 2015, B, 2010, C, 2005, or D, 2000?
I'm going to guess 2015.
Yes, you are correct. Stride had a Kickstarter campaign. I believe they reached their goal in like 12 days, but they didn't have a product because they didn't know how to value it or calibrate it.
So that initial work, what I was a part of at Boulder Center for Sports Medicine, behind the scenes of the prototype
Yeah.
Stride Power Meter, trying to correlate it to metabolic data.
That's very interesting. Like you almost never hear about them. So, next question. Who was the first woman to participate in the Boston Marathon? Is it A, Catherine Virginia Schweitzer, B, Bobby Gibb, C, Joan Benoit, or D, Nancy Ditz?
C.
No,
No.
I think it's D.
no.
A or B?
You got to pick one.
I can't remember what they were.
It's Catherine.
B.
Okay,
B.
B.
I think
You are
B.
correct.
Yes.
There's that really famous photo of all the guys like trying to rip her out.
So this is actually an interesting story because when you Google the first woman, Catherine's name shows up.
Mhm.
But Bobby was the first person to run. Bobby ran in 1966 and Catherine ran a year later. And Catherine has just been more vocal about running in the marathon and she was the one behind that photo.
Mhm.
So she kind of gained more notoriety for that.
Mm.
But oddly enough, Bobby also ran in 1967 and she beat Catherine by at least an hour.
Oh, wow.
So Bobby's the OG and she deserves props. All right, this is our last question.
We're not doing very good. You know that.
No, we're not.
Right?
You get
Well,
more.
I knew I couldn't be like, what is lactate or anything like that. I had to get you guys with some really hard trivia.
Here goes the PGC1 Alpha question.
So this one is for fun. Which one of these sports is not real? Ice skating, barrel jumping, B, ski joring, C, mountain bike bog snorkeling, or D, tightrope racing?
That's not fun at all.
Trevor,
The mountain bike something.
that is a real sport.
I was
What
going to
was
say,
it
I
again?
really hope
Mountain
that
bike
was real.
bog snorkeling. I think
Is
they do it in the
bog
UK.
Snorkeling a real
You
word?
put on a snorkel mask and you just go through a trench.
You just go through a
I
trench
don't know.
like it's
I just
no big
learned
deal.
about this.
I'm going to guess D because it sounds like it should be a sport, which makes me think it's not going to be a sport.
Yes, D is not actually a sport.
Well,
Look
so,
at you and
again?
your lawyer logic.
So ice skating, barrel jumping is actually a defunct discipline of speed skating that
can
was
see
more
that.
popular in the 50s.
I've actually
Yeah, I can see that.
Isn't that the
It
Canadian
looks so
national
cool.
sport?
Very close, yeah.
That's curling barrel jumping.
Here's a bonus trivia question for you. What is the Canadian national sport?
It has to be curling.
Hockey.
It's
No.
lacrosse.
Maple.
Thank you. It's lacrosse.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like tapping maple trees for syrup. I don't know.
And yet I couldn't remember anything about constitutional criminal procedure during the bar exam. But I know that lacrosse is the Canadian.
Canadian national sport.
All right, so those are all the questions. Thank you guys.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you for pointing out our lack of general sporting knowledge.
Hope we've all learned something today.
I have learned that there is a mountain biking
Mountain bike bog snorkeling.
bog snorkeling.
So
Yeah.
what would
Okay.
that be? You ride as
You have
fast
to,
as you
like-
can into a bog.
It's just into the mud. Like I just saw this like yesterday. But if you Google the photos, it's hilarious.
In the Netherlands, there's like a Dutch national wind riding championship, and they wait for like the windiest day of the winter. And then everybody is out riding their bike like 2.5 miles an hour into this gale force headwind, like falling over. It's great.
I thought it was going to be the other way.
No,
But
no,
like
no.
70
no,
miles an hour with the
it's
wind.
the Dutch, man. They're
Yeah.
tough.
The more you measure training data, the more important understanding it becomes.
In our advanced performance data analysis pathway, we move beyond the basics to explore more complex data analysis. We help you navigate complex techniques so you don't get lost in the numbers.
This pathway features Tim Cusick, Dirk Friel, Armando Mastracci, Coach Dean Golich, Joe Dombrowski, Trevor Connor, Dr. Stephen Chung, and me, Ryan Kohler. We also explore advanced features of WKO, Training Peaks, Exert, and Intervals.icu.
We use the term deep dive a lot around here, but this is our deepest dive yet into performance data analysis. Follow our advanced performance data analysis pathway at fasttalklabs.com.
So when we talk about this pipeline of athletes who maybe start out as enthusiasts or epic adventurers, I would say several of us here would self-identify. We look at what are the barriers to expanding this market. So let's really get an understanding of what they are so that we know how to address them, right? So can we think of any barriers that come to mind right now that are pretty blatantly obvious?
You know, I think for endurance sports, safety comes to mind first. And I think that this is first and foremost for the majority of athletes out there, because in a lot of other sports, I think that your safety is of your own volition, so to say. But oftentimes with endurance sports, because they have to be done on roadways, sidewalks, or in the vicinity of other people and cars, your life is not necessarily in your own hands. And if we take cycling as an example, but running as well, road running and road cycling were the primary forms of cycling for years. I think that with I'll say the advent of gravel, that's not necessarily the right word, but with the uprising of gravel, the reason it is growing so much is safety. And so I think it's important that we show that there are opportunities for people that they are able to be in control of their own safety while exercising.
Safety, definitely. And actually, I was reading in preparation for this a report from 2022 where Colorado, I think, is the 6th most bike-friendly state. And I believe Michigan, does anyone want to guess where Michigan was on this?
I'm actually sure it's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
I think it was 11, which was really surprising to me. And then I remembered all of my friends after college moving to Detroit and really getting into fixies and in bougie coffee. And so I was like, oh, that checks out, I guess. They were part of that movement.
There are bike paths at the coffee shops.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
So safety is a huge one. And actually, there was a Fast Talk Femme podcast episode recently on the group effect. Endurance sports so often being an individualistic sport, right? But then how do you develop a sense of community and do this with other people? And one of the things they talked about was a little bit of the safety nuances of endurance sports. And one, you put kids together in a group ride and you just pray to God that they're not going to get in a crash and the coach is liable, right? So there's like safety aspects like that when you're partaking, not just because of the infrastructure, but around other people as well. And then just the kind of internal safety feeling of endurance sports is I'm doing this alone. Like I don't have, maybe if I'm playing soccer, other people who I can pass the ball to and suddenly I'm out of the limelight. You are in your own limelight as an endurance athlete from the start to the finish line, and it's just you. So I think that sometimes that can be a scary thing to people because you're really challenging that relationship with yourself, the limits of yourself. And so there's that type of safety you have to foster within yourself as well. I think, Trevor, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, kind of tagging off of safety more into the accessibility capacity here.
Well, the two that I think of that can really limit people is accessibility and culture. Accessibility just simply, is it available to you? Do you know what's available to you? You can expand on that of, do you have the equipment? Do you have the resources to be able to do it? But I would say the biggest challenge I see with people who are particularly new to these sorts of sports could actually be that cultural side, because it can be intimidating. I see people all the time, they show up to a group ride or a group run or whatever it is, and they're new, they want to explore this, and they see all these people there in the top gear who seem to really know their stuff, and they're intimidated by it and feel like, I don't belong here. This isn't right for me. And they either kind of stay at the back and then disappear and never come back, or just never really participate in the first place.
How do you address that then? How do you break into that?
To me, it's whoever's putting on these events to make sure that it's very welcoming. When the people get there, you need to identify those people who look intimidating and go, hey, you are welcome here. Ignore the Yahoo over there with the $5,000 bike and the $500 kit. And just come enjoy. It's going to be just as fun for you.
Something that's really unique about endurance sports is this. They are very social. Other sports are also social, but you're grouped into teams. And so the uniqueness on the endurance side is that while they're social, it's oftentimes this solo effort. It's individuals coming together to be social. And so as an individual joins the group for the first time, and they're not part of the group, they're not part of the clique, then I can see how you very much feel like an outsider. We've all been there, right? But I know for me and my friends, we're always talking, we're always chatting when we're riding or running next to each other or skiing or whatever it is. And it's actually something that's really nice because you can converse with people while partaking in the sports, as opposed to playing soccer. You're not talking about, what you did last night when you're, shooting the ball at the net. I think that some of the biggest strength is also one of the hurdles, the barriers to entry.
In the Detroit area, the trail running community, especially the competitive trail running community, is really growing post-pandemic. And in the 2022 season, I wear Hoka Speedgoat 5s, and I saw this guy in front of me wearing the exact same shoe. So before I passed him, I was like, hey.
I love it. I love that. Nice.
Yeah.
Before I
nice.
left him in the dust.
I see what you did there.
And I was like, hey, nice shoes. He's like, yeah, you too. We start talking, and I just launched Expedition Detroit, and I was running the race as part of Expedition Detroit. So I pitched the company. He was like, oh yeah, that's great. We had this awesome 2-mile conversation, and it ended with him going, hey man, I'm kind of tired. You just keep going. I'm like, all right. So I went past him. This year I'm running. I see his shoes again. I hadn't spoken to him in a year. Same event. Get up right behind him again and go, hey man, how have you been? And we just continued the conversation.
That's funny.
For a mile. So no, there's absolutely a community. But kind of building off that idea of community and accessibility, a big barrier to not only endurance sports, but outdoor recreation sports as a whole is DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Last fall, I was at the Michigan Outdoor Summit up north, which was really cool because it brought, businesses, stakeholders, government agencies, nonprofits, corporations from all corners of Michigan and outside of the state together under one roof to meet for 48 hours. And it was awesome. But I'll never forget one of the presenters getting up on stage and saying, hey, as I look around this room at every industry leader we could hope to have from our state in here, I see a lot of white men in flannels. And I looked down and I was wearing a flannel, it was...
Just so you know, you're a white man too.
Thank you. And that's not only a Michigan problem. That is a North American and really, especially a U.S. specific problem. Even Detroit specifically, we're an extremely diverse market from a demographic perspective, from, beliefs, different, obviously races. We have the largest in Dearborn, the largest percentage of Arab Americans, well, in the entire country, but I think it's the largest proportion of people of Middle Eastern descent outside of the Middle East anywhere in the world.
Yep.
And that city's been under a lot of very unjustified scrutiny as of late. In the city of Detroit, with racial problems, the outdoors for generations were outlawed or were only preserved for certain groups by either law or economics. And what that has created is this culture, this identity for a large proportion of specifically Detroiters, but really outdoor recreationists across the country, that because I look the way I look or I believe the way I believe or whatever, the outdoors are not for me. And that couldn't be the farthest from the truth. And it's really important, especially for the top tier, world-class, Portugal biking, Canadian running, athletes that have a platform and have an ability to actually effectuate change, to really step into that role and to be leaders and not shy away from potentially uncomfortable conversations or uncomfortable topics. In Detroit specifically, there are a lot of great organizations. One of them is called Black to the Land Coalition, and their mission is to get especially people of color outdoors and to recognize that you belong here. We all belong here. This is shared space for all of us. And that's not only important just for people to feel safe and feel comfortable in these new sports. It's important for the sustainability and the viability of these sports and these industries that we love. So I think DEI is extremely important for the long-term sustainability and growth of all of these pursuits that we love.
We talk about breaking barriers when it comes to diversity, equity, accessibility, inclusion. And we saw so much of this during the pandemic. You talked earlier about how when the pandemic happened, many more people got outside, or they started taking up a sport. They became more active, more interested. So you had a variety of people who may not have been running outside previously, who now are, where cops were getting called and, depending on the color of their skin or if they had a hood up or something else, and they were just out, right? There was a huge movement of Black while birding. And then we moved to gender and inclusion in endurance sports. That's been a huge topic now for quite some time. And within the craft of coaching, we had some really great interviews and conversations. And gravel cycling, being a little bit newer to the scene, doesn't have as strong of ivory towers to try to reconfigure. And so that's an example of an endurance sport that is embracing more inclusive practices within the sport overall by utilizing pronouns that match what the athlete identifies with, and doing that when they're calling out the athletes as they cross the finish line, bathrooms, all of these different things that are being incorporated. So I think as the endurance sports community continues to grow, as it continues to expand, that's going to be another thing that we see people really advocating for. So we're breaking down barriers. After we've broken down barriers, it's time to build. It's time to build bridges, connections, really foster that ecosystem that you were talking about earlier. And one of those examples is what we're doing right now between Expedition Detroit and Fast Talk Labs, where you have an organization that is really fostering that local, that regional ecosystem, creating opportunities for guided expeditions to really get out there and try trail running, to try gravel cycling, and to try even getting ready for the Detroit Marathon in the fall. Outside of that, you have someone like Fast Talk Labs who says, we can help fuel you and we can help fuel Detroit with the knowledge you need. So that's an example of a bridge where Expedition Detroit has one thing to offer, this expanding athlete market, and Fast Talk Labs can meet them and say, and we'll give you this to take you further, faster. So that's, I think, another great example of how are we building bridges. I know, Dan, speaking of building bridges, I hear some things happening in Detroit as we speak.
Yes, there's something extremely exciting in the works. Speaking of literal bridges, and I love that we have an American and Canadian right here. Because
Can you hold hands during this segment? Thank you.
the Detroit region is not just Detroit, Michigan, United States of America. It also includes Southwest Ontario. And that's not only because of geographic proximity, that's because of shared values, a lot of, shared geographic features as far as where you can recreate. And what I'm most excited about is launching in 2025, another great Canadian, Gordie Howe, the legendary Detroit Red Wings hockey player. There's a new bridge being named after him. And that bridge will not only facilitate transportation between the two countries, it will also include, for the first time on that border, a pedestrian-only lane where you can run and you can bike. And it's not only just a lane for pedestrians on either side, it also connects to the Trans-Canada Trail on the Canadian side and indirectly the North Country Trail through the Iron Belt Trail on the Detroit side. So for anyone looking to get an international trail experience without having to completely, take weeks off your calendar, the Detroit region is really spearheading this new era of international recreation in North America, especially for road runners and road bikers. That's really exciting.
I mean, and ultimately that's opening up thousands of kilomiles of trails that people can access.
Yes.
Kilo miles?
Kilo miles.
I wasn't going to
Yeah.
touch it, but I'm so glad they did.
I know.
Yeah.
Is this like merging metric and imperial? Or?
Oh, were you bridging?
I was.
Oh, he's bridging. There we
Wow.
go.
He's a
Wow.
bridger.
Somebody gets the depth of my soul, and it's not you, Griffin. It's Trevor. While we're talking about bridges too, I think that we need to be thinking about bridges within sport oftentimes. And I think that there's a lot of division among users and how people are seeing. I think that the racer sometimes looks at the adventurer and they say, oh God, they're not engaging for the podium. That's not a cyclist. And we can take that thinking and go all the way up even into NGOs, right? And this is something that I've asked of USA Cycling and USA Triathlon and, even USATF, USA Track and Field. You are leaders in this space within our country. But oftentimes these NGOs, these organizations, they're serving one very specific set of the users and the community that's out there. And I really push and encourage these organizations to think about how people are engaging with the sport and what value they can bring, not necessarily from a monetary standpoint. And I think that these organizations are not doing as well as they have been previously because of the decline in the racer and the more traditional interaction with the sport. But ultimately, so for the betterment of the community, which is ultimately what's important. So to really think about how there's value regardless of how the person's interacting there.
I think that's where organizations like Expedition Detroit become immediately more approachable. And that's where I think Fast Talk Labs also could be really instrumental in bridging that gap because of the connections that we have to these
100%.
organizations.
Yep.
And so really looking forward to that as a sneak preview. Okay, so we're breaking down barriers. We're building bridges within the community and within an infrastructural capacity. Now we have something new ahead of us. We're blazing a trail. And for organizations like Expedition Detroit, there actually might be some blazing of trails happening. But what needs to happen now moving forward? What is the new innovative, creative ways that we're bringing more athletes into this space?
I'm just going to go out there and say, I think that individuals need to get involved in supporting these sports, these organizations, and these activities. And Griffin, you brought up Blazing Trail. An amazing way for that to happen is to literally get involved in volunteer trail building. More opportunity closer to home for people gets more people out there. But also, if you are in this sport and you're a listener of Fast Talk, you're a knowledgeable individual, you can take that knowledge and you can bring it to somebody who doesn't have that knowledge, who doesn't feel safe and secure because they don't have the knowledge. And, I'm sure that you would love people volunteering in your organization to lead hikes or whatever it is, or even, for smaller organizations, if you know something about marketing and you don't know a lot about mountain biking, you can help with your marketing skills. It doesn't always have to be about the sport.
I don't think we need to focus so much on getting people into the sports, because I think we have a lot of people that are getting into it saying, I want sport to be part of my life and I want it to be part of the long term, the rest of my life. I think it's more about helping people to see the opportunities out there, giving them the guidance, giving them the help that they need, because it is daunting. You just bought your first bike, or everybody's had running shoes. That's a bad analogy, but you bought your first bike and you want to go out and see what's out there, try some mountain bike trails, whatever it is. It can be really daunting if you're that new person of where do I go? How do I do this? How do I handle just even the basic situations of taking a corner, going through lights, being around other cyclists, all these things that we take for granted can be very difficult and very tough for other people, and they need that guidance.
In the health field, we would sometimes talk about food deserts, right? So where we don't have access to fresh foods and people are getting most of their foods as processed packaged goods at the local bodega or convenience store. And I kind of think about that a little bit with endurance sports, is if here in Boulder, it's a hot pocket. I know the bike lanes, the paths are right there. Heck, with the first day at this job, there are stands in the front room to put your bike and your gear. It's the culture, the system, the city itself is designed to support that lifestyle. So when I think of blazing trails for what's next, great point. We've got the people, we've got the interest. Are we developing areas where people can actually make good on that interest? And again, not to continue to beat this drum, but that's where organizations like Expedition Detroit, that's where efforts of expanding the knowledge go in and can help alleviate these drier areas where that's not so accessible.
Yeah. And kind of furthering that point, another key component is just reimagining spaces, especially in a city like Detroit that has had so much blight over the last 50 years as, the population has been decimated. In a lot of neighborhoods that were once thriving and flourishing have quite literally been reclaimed by nature. And the city has done an amazing job clearing out those old burnt out or just decayed houses. So then you have all of this reclaimed green space, literally a gift from Mother Nature. And it's like, okay, what do we do with this? And it can be literally just, blazing a literal trail right through it and creating your own community park. Or it can be, the actions of larger philanthropic organizations and government agencies of completely transforming the Detroit riverfront from warehouses to the 3-time USA Today best river walk in the country, which is true. I think they're going for their 4th right now.
And it's along the Detroit River.
It is along the Detroit River.
There you go.
Which we just learned in trivia.
Yeah. So, when you have spaces like that for most of their at least recorded history have been geared towards one specific purpose, and that purpose, let's say it's innovative or whatever, failed it, and now you've got this population that's looking for this athletic or recreational outlook. It starts with just having really the bravery and the foresight to reimagine that space and make it accessible. Make that trail where none exists, where it could exist, and to be bold and go forward with that. I know that sounds very like, rah, rah, let's get it. But it literally starts with that. And when you have a place like Detroit where that ecosystem hasn't existed for most of its history, you can do that. You can do that almost immediately and do it well. So I've seen it happen too many times to know that that's not just a mantra. You can really imagine these spaces that immediately enrich people's lives, and it's beautiful.
The other side of this too is you're talking about something on a larger, a grander scale.
Yeah.
But Griffin, I want to tie back in something that you had said, right? Where Trevor, you have done a great job of transforming this space into supporting people and activity with having things like bike storage and showers and lockers. Those make riding to work or running and riding after work or over lunch, it makes that accessible. Because now I'm not sitting in my office sweaty. Oh, you know what? I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be stinky going to my next meeting. I don't have a place. I don't want to lock my bike up outside. It's going to get stolen. And so even as individuals, we can transform spaces just like you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say rah-rah, though, because I love when people can take these brave steps. Even, I spoke to someone who is called the Tri-Doc, and this is an emergency medicine physician. Jeff's great, who partway through the pandemic, I think was just so burnt out by the practice of medicine, had this desire within triathlon, within endurance sports, and became a coach. And is now feeling so fulfilled, feeling so alive, and is able to work with people, not necessarily in a doctor-patient capacity, but in a similar I care for your well-being capacity with so much more fulfillment and just such a different relationship. And so that's an example of someone who on their own is blazing a trail. It's toward endurance sports, and that's the way that they can show up to it, which I think is a really beautiful thing too. So you have this big infrastructural reimagination of urban and green space down to the individual, what can I do in my life right now? And so I think connecting all of that, I would love to pivot to some final projections, our individual perspectives of what is next in this newer wave of athletes and coaches in endurance sports. So rather than doing our take homes, I would say, let's take it outside. But can we take it home? What are our predictions here? And what can people take with them?
Well, as we know, breakdancing is becoming an Olympic sport. And so
We'll clear this table right now.
I say that in somewhat jest, but not necessarily, because the point is this: we have seen how sport has evolved and how it has allowed different people to enter into endurance sports or activities. And I believe that we're going to continue to see. 15 years ago, we would not have predicted gravel cycling becoming what it was. What's the next thing? And in some regard, I don't necessarily know. That is going to come from the new people that are now in the sport and shaping and evolving it as it is today. Do you need a hard prediction from me?
Yes, I'd love it. Be bold. Make it wild.
Give me a moment. Other people can jump in and save my ass right now if they
Rob,
want.
that was
Awesome!
Oh, I like it. Just gave the short awesome answer there. I like that.
I'm not going to hit the 30-second bull one.
What resonated for me is you brought up jokingly the breakdancing at the Olympics. But I think that actually ties into my prediction and what we talked about very early on in the show, which was if you go back 40, 50 years, it was very clear pathways and there weren't a lot of pathways. You know, in cycling world, you had road cycling. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you just had start of mountain biking. So I think triathlon was just starting to come into existence. So you just had a couple options and there was only a few ways to do it. And those pathways were very, very clearly defined. And you either did it or you didn't. There weren't a lot of other options. Now it's every year, it seems like there's new disciplines and new ways of doing these different sports that are being introduced that it's almost impossible to keep track of it. And that NGB professional pathway is one way to enjoy the sport, but now there's hundreds of other ways. And many of them don't involve results. Many of them don't involve getting a contract or anything else like that. So to me, the future is just diversification. And how do you manage all the different ways that you can do this and all the different approaches you can take to sport and just enjoying it and being part of it?
Yeah, I like that diversification. I think that's a really nice, just heading. I think in the next 10, 15 years, you're going to see diversification of really what it means to be an outdoor destination. And that's not only a plug for Detroit. I think Detroit is one of many places, many markets that, as this post-pandemic inclusive momentum continues, I think a lot of places that have been written off by the, for lack of a better term, elitist mindset of a lot of the outdoor recreation industry are going to become the new hotspots. And they're not only going to become the new hotspots because of trail infrastructure and government or business activity, they're going to become hotspots because of the people who live there and the people who recreate there and the people who decide to become the best runner, the best cyclist, the best triathlete, the best swimmer, the best whatever that they can be there in those markets, rather than getting that, let's call it athlete drain, to other hot markets. I think you're going to see places like my hometown really rise quickly in the world's eyes and of places where you can live a full athletic recreational life. And I'm really excited for that.
I think in the last 5 years, just the absolute rise, and partially due to social media and people wanting to live their life based more on wellness, what it looks like to have a whole and balanced life, not just their job, but what they do outside of it, how they engage with the outdoors and their fitness as well. I think that this is just the beginning. And I really see this as a continuation of incorporating what used to seem like a luxury into the everyday aspect of their life. And because of that, I think people will get hooked. And I think people will continue to want to delve into something for themselves. It'll become more than a hobby. It'll become a way of life. And so I think that's how that will develop. And then I think that cities and larger areas and infrastructure will have no choice but to accommodate that growing passion. So I really think cities will have to respond to the demand. And you're seeing organizations like Expedition Detroit pair right along that momentum and make it more accessible. But I'm excited. I think rather than just the PCT trail on the West Coast that gets a lot of attention, you're going to start to see that with bike packing. And you're going to start to see these other adventures beyond just hiking, where someone really is exploring their own relationship with what it means to endure. And I think endurance sports are such a great way to do that. So my take home and to take outside is to get involved in all of these kind of tertiary unsung heroes that are making endurance sports possible outdoors, because that really does seem to be the gateway moving forward.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
I thought you were grabbing the bull one, and I was about to be like, what? How?
I'm the one who always has bleep the show. So no, I'm
I
not getting
know.
that button anywhere near the
There we
mic.
go. So that being said, I think we should sign out. I don't know if Dan knows the sign out. I feel like we should have him do it.
I do not know the sign out.
Do you have it?
You have to put on your best announcer voice.
That was another episode of Fast Talk. Subscribe to Fast Talk wherever you prefer to find your favorite podcasts. Be sure to leave us a rating and a review. The thoughts and opinions expressed on Fast Talk are those of the individual. As always, we love your feedback. Join the conversation at forums.fasttalklabs.com or tweet us at FastTalkLabs. You can head to fasttalklabs.com to get access to our endurance sports knowledge base, coach continuing education, as well as our in-person and remote athlete services. For myself, Dan Cooke of Expedition Detroit, Trevor Connor, Rob Pickles, Andrea Denke, she's Griffin McMath.
Thanks for listening. And that's a wrap.
You're listening to WAA Fast Talk, coming to you hot over the airwaves.